morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time you are watching this. Welcome back to the Since I Was Young podcast for all things Heart of Midlothian. Joining you in the same room virtually this week is myself, Ewan, and Alan. It's good to have you with us as well. If you're listening via the YouTube, if you're watching via the YouTube page or listening through Spotify, we do hope you're all good and well. We don't expect you to be, but we do hope you are nonetheless. Obviously, through this was a podcast today. Obviously, we're going to be talking about the aftermath of the Edinburgh Derby, about the whole of last week in general, but not too much. We'll pretty much focus our attention on the game at the weekend at Easter Road. And then we will look ahead to our Scottish Cup quarter-final on Friday against Dundee, which would hopefully give us a trip back to Hampden, which is what we want in the usual circumstances every time a season gets to this point. So, as always, guys, with the usuals, if you haven't subscribed to us either on YouTube or the Spotify, please check those out as well. And all of our usual socials will be on screen and in the description if you so wish to check those out too. So yeah, guys, once again, we do hope you're all good and well. Alan, let's get into the nitty gritty of the weekend. As I said, we're not going to touch too much on last week away to, no, yes, no? Home to, yeah, thank you. At home to St Ed the Mirren. Obviously, we came away with a 3-1 victory, which was nice to see. If you're looking at it from an outsider's point of view, 6 points out of 9 for the whole week, you could probably say it's decent. But I think we're going to talk a wee bit more about the manner of the Edinburgh Derby at Easter Road, which now puts Hibs back-to-back Derby wins, something that they have not achieved within 16 years, if the stat is correct, which was from yourself, Alan, so I'm going to confidently say that it is. Obviously, we can do our usuals with the team selection, etc., but I want to start it in a different way, more so after the Derby, when obviously Hibs, I would not to put too fine a point out, but I would say deservedly came out at the winners with a 2-1 victory. What was your overall thought and overall kind of emotion after the game? For me, it's probably the first time I've been a bit, I wouldn't go as far as to say angry, but very frustrated, I would say, is the key kind of word. Usually, everybody gets high on motion, especially if they're on the back end of a Derby loss. But this one felt more like a hangover, which is only kind of stopped now. But now that we're talking about it again, I'm fired up. So, yeah. So what was your overwhelming thought after the result on Sunday?
Yeah, I felt like it was like you. I felt frustrated. I felt let down, I think is probably the way I would put it from my point of view. I think I kind of I stayed away from most of social medias for Sunday because I didn't really want to be anywhere near it because you know what these places can be like. But to obviously gauge fans' reaction and stuff, I took a little scroll through some bits and pieces and posted a few little bits, but I didn't really engage too much because I just didn't really have the energy for it, to be honest. But yeah, it's not even just this derby that obviously we've lost. I think that the previous one, and even the one at the start of the Critchley reign as well, when he was only in the door for 3 games or something, and he had a derby. We've not been particularly brilliant in any of them this season, so there's that to kind of look at as well. But in terms of Sunday as a context on its own, I felt really let down because I felt like the first half we did okay. I don't think we were brilliant in the first half, but we were definitely the better side. Tactically, I thought we nailed it in the first half. That 4-3-3, I thought it was brilliant. But something happened at half time, and then the second half we just didn't come out, and that is the bit for me that really struck with me. I was like, do this team know how important 3 points would be in that game? Like I know, like you said, 6 points from nine is a good takeaway from a tough week, and it is realistically, but it could have been more. And obviously, in an Edinburgh derby, like you say, you've got to be up for that. You've got to be going for it. And I just felt like in the second half we were flat. And I think to be fair, Hibs improved in the second half, and we didn't know how to deal with that. So maybe I'm not doing Hibs enough credit because I don't like to do that, but I prefer to look at it from our side. But in fairness to Hibs, they actually stepped it up in the second half, and we didn't really know what to do. But yeah, I would echo you and say frustrated and fed up and a little bit let down. I think would be how I felt at full time.
Yeah, no, no, absolutely. I mean, just to go back to the couple of points you made, um, the first half I thought was relatively good in the sense that we reacted brilliantly, in the space of a few minutes. Again,
Yeah,
I didn't intend to criticize Hibs in any way. I had no thoughts after the game of, you know, Hibs played bad or Hibs did this or did that. I wholeheartedly hold my hat off to them. Especially in the context that they've now went 15 games unbeaten as well. We would be saying the exact same thing if the shoe was on the other foot. So, much like yourself, I do have to give some sort of credit to them as well. But the first half, I thought the opening 10, with the likes of the goal that we gave away, again, there was just no was it communication there. I would have thought, and this is not to take the light away from Taylor, but where the ball was and how fast both players were actually going, I would have expected before the camera the panned in on him. I would have thought, was it the Gordon would have been at least maybe trying to close it down. But both Taylor and the Gordon in that moment, I personally thought that they were just in the fighting, was it Boyle to score? And to be fair, he did well in the circumstances that, he ran half of the was it the pitch to get it, and then
yeah,
he scored. After we then got the goal back, which again I've not spoke highly of him all season, but I thought George Grant did really well taking that ball, and then he put it in to the back of the net. And for the majority of the first half, I thought we looked more the likely team to go on and score. Because obviously we had the goal disallowed, which was right. We had a chance from Shankland as well. The Kabangu was pretty much in their faces. We were finding the pockets of space to break down there at the back five as well, So I thought we did relatively well. And I, even when we didn't score and when Hibs scored them at the first goal, I genuinely thought that Hibs were going to, was it the crack on, genuinely. But
yeah,
once we got that goal, obviously the energy shifted towards us. We looked the more threatening team. But as you said, once we got into the second half, as you said, it was just completely flat. And
yeah,
it just looked like most of the team completely forgot that it was like a derby.
yeah, yeah. I think you're right. I think there's been a lot of, again, talking about sort of fan reactions and stuff. Been a lot of people slating Taylor, and you know, directly after the game, I'm sitting there going, yeah, this guy's not got it. There's something not right there. I wanted Taylor to start against Hibs. I did. I was very much in favour of him starting. And when I saw the lineup, I thought, yeah, it's a good lineup. Obviously Devlin's still not fit to play it, which is a big thing, and I'll talk about that later. But
Mm.
for for me, when I looked at the lineup, I thought, yeah, do you know what? That's a good lineup. It's an
Yeah.
attacking lineup. But Taylor, does all right for the Martin Boyle goal. He matches him for pace, but then Boyle's clever and gets the wrong side of him. And then Taylor knows once he's in the box, he can't foul him because chances are it'll be a penalty. And it's a good finish from Martin Boyle. Annoyingly good finish. It's funny, I missed the game live because we were away. We were actually on a train coming back when the game was on. But I saw when I sat down on the train, I saw Martin Boyle's little celebration when he's crying. He's doing the
Mm.
crying face in front of the Hearts fans, and I thought that's a bit bold to do that 5 minutes into an Edinburgh derby. You know, you've scored first, but the game's still got 85 minutes to go. And then by the time we sat down on the train and got a seat, I'd seen that George Grant had equalised. And I was like, well, there you go. I bet Martin Boyle feels quite
Mm.
stupid now, but come full time, I'm sure he didn't. But
Right.
yeah, it's they were preventable things that happened in the game, and like you said, when we scored to make it 1-1, I was looking at that going, right, we've taken the wind out their sails.
Mm-hmm.
Let's try and kick on ourselves and do something. Because, Hibs did it against Celtic when they played them at Easter Road. They started really quickly. They scored after like 2 or 3 minutes or something.
Yeah.
So we had to expect a quick start from them with them being the home team, but we had to then deal with that, and we did, and we responded. But from about the 10th minute to half time, I'm watching it and I'm going, okay, we're creating a few chances here, but there wasn't that energy. There wasn't that.
Yep.
There was a little bit of it. Like Benny did well, like the pressing and the closing down and stuff as he does, but it just felt it just felt a little bit flat, and it felt like we weren't really wanting to take that initiative to them. Like we did have a few chances, and saying Kabangu was caught offside. I lost count of the number of times that Kabangu was caught offside. Just didn't quite get his movement right, but yeah, that it is frustrating. Like it's really frustrating to lose a derby in any stage of the season. But when you're trying to get into top six and you're trying to kick on, 3 points would have been important, and we didn't manage to get them. I would have even taken a point if I'm honest with you at Easter Road. I know obviously Easter Road's normally a happy hunting ground for us, but if somebody had said to me before kick-off, you're going to get a point, I would have went, do you know what? It's not the worst result in the world. But yeah, we just looked a bit flat, and as I say, the second half was disappointing. But like you, I was happy for George Grant to get a goal. Like I've been a critic of him for a long time, as have you. But in recent weeks, he's done okay. I don't know whether he's got a bit of the Josh Ginnelly playing for a contract syndrome kind of thing, maybe. But he seems to be. He was good against St Mirren as well when he came on in that game too. So there's maybe an element of that. I think he's done well the last few weeks. My opinion on him getting a new contract has still not changed, though. I'd be quite happy to see him leave in the summer. But I felt quite sorry for him being the one that was wheeled out to do the media duties after as well. I thought that was a bit harsh. Obviously, I know somebody has to do it, but the guy that scores a goal being the one that has to front up to the cameras is a little bit harsh because obviously he's happy he scored a brilliant goal, but he's disappointed that we haven't won the game. So the goal that he scored doesn't really mean anything in the grand scheme of things.
I get what you mean. I didn't know that, if he was picked to do like, all the media stuff. Okay, cool. My issue was, and this is not to take away from his performances for the last I was a few weeks, because I agree he has been the better throughout that time. However, saying that, Hibs wanted it more than us. Okay, so then why wasn't it apparent after the derby? Was it Castle? Why would you come out with that after the game when that it means nothing to say that? And I'm not putting it on him personally, but you go to any derby, home or away, you always have to want it. You don't have to particularly match Hibs in the situation, but if you're matching everybody else's energy, you will go like in there was and there to get the result. There's been, I understand, and I'm trying not to get my was it Ed was it was it was it Ed was it Ed the Critchley out hat. That's not where I'm at, but he should have known how much this derby means to us. And I'm not saying it because we got beat. If we went out and we put on the good performance and we got beat, I wouldn't be like I was sitting here raging about it as much as we should be. But however, Critchley, and he's given me a bit of, I wouldn't say as much, but he's given me a bit of kind of Robbie Nielsen syndrome, where I don't take responsibility for this loss because we've mentioned it. No, no, no. I'm not saying it was all his fault because, I've said many a time that both players and the manager should be held accountable when it comes to horrible performances. Because if you're going to be like, right, so we've not shown up in was it in arguably the three was it derbies this season? Okay, why?
Yeah.
Why are the players not? Was it like once again? I wouldn't go as far to say not the giving a fuck, but why they not the matching Hibs in this matter? And it's the way, and I've said this before as well, and this is why I'm still not entirely convinced of the Critchley as such, because it's the character he shows where it gives me a more of right. This is my stepping stone club because we saw it with Naismith. Fair enough, he might have a bit more experience in these games, but he knows what this game, in particular, no matter how bad a season we're having, as long as we beat them, then usually 9 times out of 10, you'll be all right. But too many big games that we've had, and we're talking Hibs, we're talking Celtic, we're talking the Rangers, we're talking them at the Conference League as well. Too many big games, and this has been the manner of the side that is shown up, and it's just been the same. So, in your opinion, and I know I've said quite a lot to to take in, but what do you take from that? Like, is it right? Is it wrong? Is it totally out? What?
I think, like again, as I say, I saw a lot of Critchley out stuff on social media over after the game and over the weekend, really, and it's still kind of going. And I think you're right in what you say about the pressure from the big games, and you talk about like the Celtic games, the Rangers games, even the Aberdeen game, the 0-0 that we should have won. You know, and the records in derbies this season's not been good enough. And you're absolutely right, and that's factual. We've not done well this season in a derby. We've not won one, and obviously Critchley's lost. Well, he's not won a derby yet. So, yeah, it's disappointing in that sense, and I get it. When people talk about like the big game records and stuff, and it's a totally fair measuring stick for any Hearts manager. But I think my response to that is it's kind of twofold, really. Like Critchley's come in from outside, not knowing anything about obviously they've done his homework on Hearts, they've done his homework on Scottish football. It's not as if it's played on the moon, like you can access it, like you do know what it's about. And the Edinburgh Derby is one of the one games that ends up on Sky at least once a season, so there is exposure of it. So he will be aware of the Derby before he got to Hearts, but you don't really fully know what it's about until you're in it and until you're part of it. And I think I'm not giving Critchley excuses because I think during the game there were things he got wrong. Um, I think the substitutions should have been made far earlier than they were. I realise we're kind of deviating away from the game itself, but
I don't know.
There were tactical things that he did get wrong, and making the substitutions later when Taylor and Penrith were clearly struggling at fullbacks, because Hibs had their width and they got at them. If you make that sub earlier and you bring on a Musa to help Taylor on the right earlier, just to double up, Musa's not brilliant, but he's a hard worker. He would have put a shift in, might have helped Taylor, and then obviously the second goal comes from that side again. But yeah, going back to Critchley, I think I like Neil Critchley. I'll hold my hands up and say I'm a Neil Critchley fan. I know what you mean when you say the way he comes across sometimes, and I understand that. The not my responsibility, not taking the responsibility for it. But I think we have to remember it's still very early in the Neil Critchley Hearts Jamestown situation. I think a bit of context is needed in that sense, and I think when you consider as well, yeah, he's not had a great big games record this season, but you look at the Rangers game that we lost, we should have won that game. We should have hammered them. The Aberdeen game that we drew 0-0, we should have won that game. These things, certain moments in those games hinge on Critchley's decisions, but they also hinge on the players' decisions on the park. And these players have not put a shift in all season long. Like, this is not a Neil Critchley thing. This is a group of players that, in my opinion, have gone a bit stale. And I think there's players at Hearts that are still very lucky to be at Hearts. And if we want to get to where we want to get to consistently, and I had a conversation with someone about this yesterday or day before, I can't remember, but if we want to be that consistent side that finishes top 3, top 4 every year, are some of these players that we currently have good enough to do that? Probably not. Is Neil Critchley good enough to get us to do that? That remains to be seen. Maybe, maybe not. But you've got to start somewhere. You've got to start at a point. And I think this season, and obviously, I'm getting ahead of myself because obviously the season's not finished yet, but this season is one that will be quickly forgotten about when it's finished. Let's be honest. I think we're all kind of, aside from the Scottish Cup, we're all looking at it going, can we just finish it now? I don't I don't think Neil Critchley is blameless, and I do agree with you to an extent. But for me, I place more blame at the feet of the players who have played in multiple derbies and know what it's about. If you're talking about, your Steinbenders, your Cartoons, they've just come in the door. Like, I'm not going to say to them that they should know because they've just got here, they've just experienced it. But your George Grants and your captains, Lauren Shankland, I have seen, and I don't, again, I'm going back to the game, but that performance from Lauren Shankland was one of the worst performances from a Hearts captain in a derby that I can remember. And
Agreed.
that's the man that's leading you as a teammate. I watched him and I thought, he's not at it today. And don't get me wrong, when Lauren Shankland is at it, he can win a derby on his own, like he's done it before. But he gets a stupid yellow card for kicking the ball into the stand. You're a captain of a Hearts team in an Edinburgh derby at Easter Road. Don't rise to it. I know Shankland's a bit of a wind-up merchant. He gives it back to fans as much as he gets it off them. But you're a captain in an Edinburgh derby. It's a melting pot. It's an atmosphere. You're walking a tightrope for the rest of that game. And I just thought his performance on the weekend was, as I say, one of the worst that I've seen from a Hearts captain in that fixture for a long, long time. But to go back to Critchley, and people will call me a happy clapper because I've been called it on social medias this weekend already. I want to see where it goes because the footballing department in general over the last few years has gone quite stale. I think you would agree with that. I think the managerial appointments have all been very safe. I think, getting Robbie Nielsen back, and don't get me wrong, he did a brilliant job when he did, and then obviously it was the right time for him to go. And then Stephen Naismith comes in and people didn't want him at the time, but he came in and proved why he should be the manager. And then, do you know what? That ran its course and he couldn't take us any further. Critchley's just beginning. And this is, again, it's something that football fans don't like to hear, and I'll probably get slated for it, but you need patience at times. And I do think, as I say, that this Hearts team and the players, the group of players, we know the summer is going to be massive in terms of turnaround because I think those at the top of the club realise this is time for a reset and maybe we need that. And I don't, obviously I'm not happy losing to Hibs. I should never be happy losing to Hibs. But it needs to be a wake-up call and it needs to be an element of, right, that cannot happen. And Critchley, quite rightly, is under pressure because of his big game record to kind of go back to it. And I get that. But people wheeling out lines like, oh, he's winning games that you would expect us to win. That's why he's still there. For context, the loss to Hibs was only our second loss in 12 games, the other one being to Rangers. So, you can talk about Hibs being on a run of 15 games unbeaten. They've only taken 4 more points than us in the last 15 games. So there's elements of ways that you can word stats and things like that make it not as bad as it actually might seem. And I think maybe, in as much as I'm still fizzing about the derby, I'm still even more fizzing about it talking about it now. I have mellowed a little bit since the derby because I kind of contextualize it and go, well, it's not good enough. But where we were when Neil Critchley came in, and don't forget that cannot be forgotten about. Bottom of the table, winless, 2 points. If you'd said to me on Boxing Day, when we obviously lost the derby, that at this point, with 4 games to go before the split, we'd still be in with a chance mathematically of being in Europe, I probably would have laughed at you. In fact, you'd probably go back to episodes that we did around that time, and I would have said that. So I understand people's frustrations with Critchley, and I get your point of view. I totally get it. But to me, I look at it from a bigger picture point of view and go, where we were and where we are, there is improvement. So
Mm.
that's something, maybe. I don't
Yeah,
know
no,
if, again, as I say, call me a happy clapper if you like in the comments or whatever, but that's my view. And if you want to be negative and be, anti Critchley or anti Hearts or budge out McKinley out, feel free. That's your entire. You can do that, but I can't bring myself to do
I'll be exactly that man right now. No, 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 I'm not going to be. No, it's not. It's just like, no, no, no. As I said at the start, I wasn't saying in the sense of I want him out. No, because
that. No,
you can't judge like a manager if he's not had had a preseason, getting in the players that he wants and molded it
exactly.
to his team. No, no, no.
Yeah,
But like at the same time, it's a thing that I felt from the start, and you get a vibe about a manager pretty darn
yeah.
quickly, and
Mm-hmm.
this is not to put down anything you've said. All that you've said absolutely makes sense as well. I totally agree in the sense of, you know, with the context of things, if we're comparing it against Hibs, it's not actually that bad. As we said at the start, taking 6 points out of nine, it's not it in the context of what it is, it's actually good. But I think it's just like going back to what we said at the start, it's just a manner, and I'm
Yeah,
putting that down to both, was it Ed the Critchley and the players as well, like just to kind of come back to what you said. I've never seen a performance like that from Shankland ever, and we've not even talked about it yet, but the manner of how that second goal, if you close him down and to put even just a bit of was it the pressure on him, there's no way he's going to try and score. But he knew that he had time. He had a clear view of where he was going to hit it. You know, especially when the fact
yeah,
that even before that, Hibs could have been 2-1 up from the chance from the Boyle as well. Like
yeah,
when he like screwed it wide, he had miles of fucking space and time.
yeah,
And you know, with Shankland, the more I know I'm probably going to be saying it just because of the result, but the more and more we get to the end of this season, the more and more I'm not actually that harsh if he stays or goes. That whole kind of drama of, even before the season started, where everyone was a bit on edge, or if somebody comes in with an offer and for even like a couple of million, you know, everybody was a bit on edge, thinking, "Oh my god, what are we going to do?" But you know, again, I know it's not being solely down to him in terms of his own performances. Like obviously, there has been a lack of service there as well for him to have the chance to score. But even just based on that um, performance at the weekend, it was just a bit flat. It was lackluster. There was no spark. And I'm not saying just down to him as well. Like, almost all of the team was flat. But, you know, yeah, like hopes of a top six, which, I still expect us to actually make. Like, don't get me wrong. I'm not writing off the whole season now and thinking that we're not going to make the top six. Obviously, I want us to try and still push for those European places as well, of course. But
mm-hmm.
if that's the kind of manner that we're going to be like for the rest of the season, then yeah, we will remain where we are
Yeah.
for the rest of the season. But you know, it was just yeah,
It's difficult. It's
yeah,
difficult. It is, and it's without kind of going over old ground. I know, like we've spoken about Shankland to death this season, and there's good things he's done and there's not so good things he's done. And I think, as I said, his performance in the derby was horrendous. When you're outshone by a 17-year-old that's playing up front with you, I think that speaks volumes. I think, James Wilson was fantastic. I thought he did everything he could do. He was, putting up a physical fight, which for a 17-year-old that's built like a crisp packet is it's quite difficult to do. But then, I was reading a thing about James Wilson. I think it was in the Heart Standard, and it was I can't remember who it was. Anyway, I can't remember. Maybe it was James Penrice that did an interview, and he was like, James Wilson's one of the ones that lifts the heaviest weights in the gym and stuff. And you're like, yeah, because he's a 17-year-old kid that wants to improve and wants to develop and wants to better himself. That's what that's about. And I really liked James Wilson's performance in the derby. I thought he put himself about really well. I thought him and Benny were the two best players in the park for us, and yet they both got taken off. James Wilson went off before Hibs scored what was ultimately the winner, and then Benny gets taken off with 10 minutes to go. That was the sub that I felt should have happened earlier. I think don't take Benny off. I think take somebody else off. Maybe take George Grant off and bring on a drama. Bring somebody on that's going to help Taylor down that side, or better yet, just take Taylor off. I don't know who we had on the bench. Maybe Forrester was on the bench. I can't remember, but Taylor had a stinker, and I think that's clear for all to see. But yeah, in terms of the game itself, you look at it and you say, right, do you know what? That was bad. That was bad. And I've got Hibs supporting friends that have, messaged me and tried to get a rise out of me. And I'm like, do you know what? Fair play. Like, I can't, there's nothing I can say. There's no response. There's no fight back, because I'm like, well, yeah, you deserve to win. Like, that's fine. That's what happens.
I mean,
the better team turned up on the day and won in the second half.
I mean, but to be fair as well, they should have had a penalty. Like, I know it was very soft, but I've seen those they're given plenty of times. Just go to any Celtic or the Rangers match. Like, I've seen a given plenty.
Oh yeah, and that was Taylor again, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So it kind of shows you where the weak link was, and the tactical change in the second half did not work. And again, I put that at the feet of Critchley, because it didn't work, and Hibs exploited it, and they had their wide players, gave them a field day down the wings, and we couldn't cope. So there's elements of frustration in that side. I think Cammy Devlin being out is a big thing, and I spoke about that briefly earlier, and I think that's kind of the last thing I'll say about the game. But the fact that we don't have another player that plays like Cammy Devlin is a big issue as to why this season has gone the way it has, I think. And I'm not just saying that about Cammy Devlin. I would say it about Shankland as well. Not having a striker for the first half of the season that plays in that Shankland mould cost us many points. And Devlin being out with his concussion, yeah, we've got a lot of midfielders, but nobody does what Cammy Devlin does. Benny and Devlin together make that partnership work. Benny was very good against Hibs, but he didn't have the help that he needed. And Devlin would have provided that. And I think, just quickly before we kind of speak about whatever else you want to talk about, but to me, the biggest indicator of that, and the biggest indicator of how highly Critchley rates Cammy Devlin and how important he is to the Critchley system, is that when Cammy Devlin goes out with an injury, the whole system changed. That's when we started playing the diamond in the midfield, and that's when we started playing the 4-3-3. When you've got one player that goes out injured, and that means you have to change your entire shape, that shows how important that one player is. And I'm not saying if Cammy Devlin plays against Hibs, we win it, but having that battler and that terrier in the midfield might have helped.
So in that sense as well, if you're Neil Laird Critchley, and obviously we will talk about it in a sec, but coming for the quarterfinals of the Scottish Cup, if you're Neil Laird Critchley in that dressing room at East the road on Sunday afternoon, what are you saying to the players?
Telling them they're walking home, to be honest. I don't. Again, I think we spoke about Critchley's sort of comments after the game, and I'll keep it short. But Critchley's comments after the game kind of impressed me a little bit, but at the same time, I was a little bit concerned. I understand that he's kind of taken the emotion out of the game, because he's a manager. He's got to look at it objectively. Like, they've got to look at it as 11 versus 11 on a football pitch. And when they review it and they watch the game back, they probably did it yesterday in training, maybe today. That's what they'll do. They'll focus on it as a game. They won't focus on it as an emotional situation, because it's a game of football, realistically. Yes, it's against your rival. That's important. That adds extra. But if you're not doing the basics, you're not going to win any game of football, regardless of whether it's a derby or you're playing against bottom of the league. And I think, to me, that's what Neil Critchley was kind of talking about when he says we'll take it, we'll strip it back, and I'll go away and sort of. I think he said something like he'll cut himself off from the noise, which is totally fair because he can't allow the noise to affect them. If that makes sense.
Yeah, no, Alan, I am take your points like you're on as well, and I'll try not to be too anti-Critchley, but um, just to like like to wrap this up as well, like I know that you were obviously saying like you may run like at the risk of being like like slaughtered online, um, I may do as well. I didn't think John the Beaten had a bad game. I thought he did all right. I genuinely thought he did all right. Like,
Not bad.
let the game flow. There wasn't many cards, but taken out straight away, and that's what I actually want to see. Like in a derby, and to be honest, as I mentioned as well, I'm kind of glad like he didn't get the penalty because it was fucking Stonewaller, Stonewaller. but
To
hey
be
ho,
fair, I actually
sorry, go on.
forgot it was John Beaton. No, I was just going to say I actually forgot it was John Beaton was the referee. I just looked up there, so that shows you that he actually didn't have a bad game.
So did I as well. As soon as I tuned in as well, I like literally as soon as I saw his face, I thought, "Oh yeah, bastard!" But hey ho, like as we said, like it was a like a bit of a nice like sort of the venting session. So I'm glad that you were there as well, Alan. So moving on to hopefully bigger and better things as we uh, flow through the week to our quarter final match against Dundee at home at Castle. As we said at the start, hopefully a route to Hampden once more for this season. So, Alan, what are your thoughts on this as well? Obviously, contributing to what we talked about as well. What do you hope to see from the squad as well? We're coming into this game because again, massive game. As I said, a chance to maybe put our a toe into the final as well. Like if we get past Dundee, what are your thoughts on what you hope to expect on Friday night?
I think it's the perfect game for us to bounce back. If it was away from home, I'd be a little bit more worried. But Dundee haven't been in great form for a while. We kind of started it when we battered them, and then they lost 6-0 the next game against Celtic, and they've kind of not really recovered. They won their last round of the Scottish Cup 4-0 against the Airdrieonians. So, but other than that, they've not won in I think it's about 6 or 7 games since we played them. So that kind of says a lot. I actually feel like they could be one of the sides that I think St Johnstone might catch them. I still think St Johnstone and Dundee will be the two that potentially go down, but there's something about St Johnstone. I just don't feel like they'll finish bottom of the table. I think Dundee will. But yeah, in terms of a cup tie, it's obviously away from the league. It's not related to that at all, but we need to see a reaction. Critchley has an interesting question in front of him in terms of squad changes. Who's going to be fit? Who's going to be available? If Cammy Devlin's back, you would imagine he comes straight back in. Taylor, do you give him another chance, or do you put him on the bench and play Forrester, or do you put both of them on the bench and maybe play Lewis Nielsen at right back? Because I've heard that being muted as well as something they could do. So there's definitely selection things that Critchley will have to take into consideration. If I was in his shoes, I'd be making as many changes as I could, but still, try to keep some consistency. There's
That
questions about the cap. There's questions about the captain as well,
I
potentially.
mean, I mean, I mean. Sorry to interrupt, Alan. I mean, that was going to be my next question. Do you actually feel that there will be like an overhaul and change in terms of of the squad name for Friday?
I think we might see a few. I think Critchley's not really been one to make mass changes because he's probably got a group of players he feels he can trust and he's just kind of ran with them. But I think we might see a few changes. Defensively, we don't really have a lot we can do, but maybe Penrice might get a rest because we actually have another left back now that can play. Um, maybe Neuenhoff starts, maybe Benny gets a rest. I don't know, but you also kind of want to look at it and go, I'm sitting here saying I'd make loads of changes, but equally there's an argument to say put exactly the same team that played against Hibs out and let them go and prove that they do have a bit of bottle about them and they can win a big game. So
Yeah,
there's
point.
that side as well. But it'll be interesting to see. I think regardless of who features, I think we have enough quality to get a win. We showed it when we battered them just at the start of February. Obviously, it's a different game because it's a cup context, but we've got ability and we just need to see a reaction. And I think being under the lights on a Friday night at Tynecastle, I don't think it's a sellout yet, which does not surprise me based off the weekend. But there may well be a few more tickets sold between now and the game, so it wouldn't shock me if it was a sellout in the end. But like we've said about Tynecastle before, if we don't start quickly and start well and see a reaction, it could get a bit toxic because this is a big game for Critchley and his team, and Critchley needs to respond as much as the players do.
We need to see a reaction and toxic environment. Two words that I love in the same place, but I think that's the message that we can take from this podcast as well. Obviously, we would love to hear all your thoughts for every Jambo that's hopefully was at Camden. We would love to hear all your thoughts after the weekend, how we go moving forward, moving into the Dundee game as well in the Scottish Cup, and just your overall thoughts the Critchley in general. Do you feel that he needs a summer to hopefully assemble a squad of his own, and do you feel as if he's the right man to take us forward for the future? We'd love to hear all that and more. And from myself and Alan, thank you very much for watching. It was a bit of a hard one to get through for this last sort of 40 minutes, but we got there. Obviously, again, guys, if you haven't subscribed to the YouTube channel or the Spotify, please think about subscribing. And obviously, as we said at the start, check out all the socials as well. We're on pretty much everything. Any social app you subscribe to, we're probably there. So please check that out. So everybody going to the game on Friday, we hope you have a good one and hopefully have, as Alan rightly said, a bit of a reaction mixing with a bit of toxicity. That's a recipe I quite like. So from myself and Alan, we do hope you have a good one and we will see you next time. You all take care. Bye for now.